President Falk, Mr. Fulkerson, ladies and gentlemen, I am not Paul Tucker. Let me just clarify that. I am Mariët Westermann, on your program identified as the Provost of NWO Abu Dhabi and soon to depart, or rather come back to New York to join the Mellon Foundation. I think Lisa said it correctly, basically. I don't think anyone who identifies him or herself as a leader of the art, or who might be identified as a leader in the arts, woke up one fine day when they were 10 years old and said, "Mom, Dad, now I know what I want to do. I want to be a leader of the arts." Even less probably did any one of us on this fine panel wake up about that same time and say, "I want to be a maverick leader of the arts." In fact, I think most of us were surprised to be identified as such when we read the program carefully. It made us feel probably a little bit better about ourselves in certain ways, but I think in the end it probably has something to do, as Lisa implied, with the slightly funny CVs that we have. And I will get to my own an aspect of my own funny CV by way of example a little bit further on in these brief comments. So for me, the dilemma is even greater in that I didn't even think I was going to be anything in the arts. And here I want to make just one little comment about Williams and the importance of Williams and in general liberal arts education. I came to Williams from Holland precisely because I didn't know what I wanted to be and what I could be, and I thought I probably would be something in law or maybe something in political journalism, and I pursued courses according to a fairly straight regimen of what I thought was a proper European education. And it wasn't really until my junior year, my second semester, in this very auditorium, that I discovered that art history might be a path, just because everybody else had told me you had to take art history, which I thought was an incredibly frivolous thing to do. And just now, as I ascended this podium, I felt a wave of nervousness. And it is because I know that this person who converted me to art history, Zerka Filipczak, who I just spotted in the room, actually, as I stood here, and I showed this extraordinary leadership, frankly, of the arts, because leadership can be affected on many, many levels. You don't have to be the head of anything much, although I think she was the chair of art history at the time, but that is irrelevant. She had a captive audience at noon. We called it darkness at noon, but nobody went to sleep when the slides came on and Zerka talked about them. And it was that experience that, although I never became an art history major, made me take more art history after that course 102, which I think was Plato to NATO, basically, or maybe it was Giotto to NATO. And I then worked with Zerka in the subsequent year and was able to get access to art history scholarship as a way of doing history in this very immediate way that President Falk has spoken about in a very moving way. So maybe that's a good way in to say leadership is not about setting yourself on some determined career path. I think that's important. I think it has been, if I am a leader of the arts, or have been, at the moment I'm not that concerned on a daily basis with the arts really, it was about following a passion, discovering it, following it, sure, realizing I was good at it, could grasp it, but that I found enormous pleasure and satisfaction in working very hard, and then finding opportunities within institutions that valued what I cared about and valued about sharing those interests with others, and particularly with young people and students. And so then when you follow these passions and you work hard at it, opportunities will open up, and again they open up in often unexpected places. This means that very odd little moves may ensue, and that leads you to that funny CV. Following and seizing these opportunities and trying to do the best for these institutions that you care about, whether they be, in my case, museums or universities, the two areas and places I've worked within, and research institute as well. And then finding yourself somehow heading them up or playing significant roles within them, because leadership is not only at the top, as we know. You realize quite quickly that leadership is not equivalent, as it is so often thought, to just really good management. Good management is important, but I think if you have leadership as a circle of abilities and a circle of attitudes to your work and the people who work with you, if that is this leadership circle, the people who shape the institution or the project or the initiative, whatever it is that you're involved in and that you care about, then you think of management as this other sort of circle of good executive ability skills. Somewhere in the middle, you get that sort of sweet spot, perhaps, of a leader who not only has that big vision piece, the big picture ability to see ahead and bring people along for a kind of vision and then execute it, that sweet spot where that is then combined with real executive ability, which is not just about pushing the paper in the right direction, although that's important, managing the paper clips, that's important, watching the funds, keeping your constituencies informed. It is also very much, on the whole, about follow-through and being able to break down that big picture. It's not enough just to be the cheerleader. It's not enough to be the good news brigade every day, although it is important to be cheerful and optimistic about what you're doing, I think, if you're passionate about it. It is also about being able to break down the task you've set yourself, that the tasks that make up the vision, that can deliver the vision, and then figuring out, well, what the next steps are. And you can't do the next steps by yourself. You really need to be able to bring along people with them, and that can sometimes be very challenging. Of course, it involves all those buzzwords: consensus building, good listening, good responding, and sometimes making tough decisions. And I think leadership manifests itself in this way, often at its finest, in the very challenging moments that every institution or country or entity will go through. Williams has indeed produced extraordinary leaders of the arts by that definition, and also it has attracted them, and the town has attracted them. I would think, for example, Lisa Corrin is a shining example. I think so is Michael Conforti, so is Joe Thompson. We have been very, very fortunate. We've had a magnificent visionary, Tom Krenz, in our community. And just mentioning those names, and I know you know them all well, gives you a sense of the wide range of leaderly styles. And there is some bone to pick with every one of them, with every one of those styles. It is being able, though, to stick consistently with the goals and bringing people along. That probably is a real mark of leadership, even as you sometimes have to make unpopular decisions. So no, leaders are not necessarily born. Some people have more of an aptitude for this kind of thing. That is certainly true, but there are certainly skills and attitudes you can foster and develop, especially if you listen to what others have to say about what you do and how compelling you may be. And so for me, if I look at my career, I can make retrospectively very good sense of it. I can tell you everything that I was thinking and doing at the time. But again, it wasn't thinking about some end goal that I had in mind. And to this day, I don't have an end goal in mind, and I feel very, very happy about that, I have to say. So this is the Maverick piece. I was trying to think, why does Lisa think that I'm a maverick? And I looked, and I could see that there were sometimes decisions I took because I wanted to follow the passions and the interests, which were not only about the cause of the history of art and the object and our responsibilities to the makers of these magnificent objects in the past that erupt into our present every day in that very direct way that art objects, disturbing almost way that art objects have of doing. And so one such odd move was when I was a baby art historian at Rutgers, and I was up for tenure. And one day I got a call from my extremely nice chair, and I remember I was in the National Gallery of Art in Washington looking at things, and I get this call, so I hurry out to the hallway, and it is my chair, and he was a very kind man, and he said, "Mariët, I just heard from the provost, you have tenure for life." It was so disappointing. It was such an I felt it sounded like a life sentence, right? Which it wasn't. It is an extremely fine institution. I would happily go back there any day. But it is maybe no coincidence that then when I had received in the first year of the Clark Fellowships, I had received one of these magnificent fellowships here. And then when a job became available to become Associate Director to Michael Holley of Research and Academic Programs, and I realized how that would stretch me and how I would learn about other kinds of disciplines, visual culture, philosophy, things that I really had only dabbled in, and how that would take me out of my own narrow, but I thought very interesting, research on Dutch art, that I seized that opportunity and indeed resigned tenure, which is almost completely, I guess, a heterodoxy, one would have to say. And maybe one other example, then I did something really very conventional a couple of years later, which was to return to my graduate institution, the Institute of Fine Arts at New York University, which is really the only place where I can say, I suppose, that I have been a leader of the arts. The Institute of Fine Arts is a very fine graduate institution in art history, archaeology, and conservation at New York University. It is ranked as the best in the world, whatever that means, but I certainly thought it was the best in the world, and I was very happy to be there. And as director, I realized that this was, unlike the Clark project, which was a startup, which is what drew me there. I was fascinated by that challenge. It's the challenge that brought me to NYU Abu Dhabi, which most people would have considered a truly nutty move. But it was again that ability to build a new institution out of whole cloth that interested me. The Institute of Fine Arts problem was very different. And I would say a more difficult challenge of leadership than even NYU Abu Dhabi, which was very controversial within our university and outside it, was when I went there. This was the challenge at the Institute of Fine Arts. I had been taught by all these extremely fine professors who are to this day I admire and I'm grateful for. The Institute, when I got there, was still a very distinguished institution, but it had, for its time, 2002, a very, you could say, it was becoming a niche type institution because it had this incredible strength in Western Europe and the ancient classical world. It had literally on its faculty of 25 full-time faculty and many adjuncts, maybe 3 specialists outside the Western world, including ancient Mesopotamia, outside the Western world, and 1 in the Islamic world. And so this seemed a real challenge. At the same time, it was a demographically advanced institution. So it was also necessary to make some room for younger scholars, and I was, at the time, the youngest faculty member. I reduced the median age, I think, by a few years just by joining the faculty. And so beginning the conversation with that faculty of deeply respected mentors, great scholars in their own right, absolutely nothing wrong with any of their scholarship, highest order, and trying to shape a conversation with them through a year in which we had to raise topics like this. Isn't it time that if we are able to get 5 new positions, which I was trying to do at the time, 5 new lines, just to get advanced hiring going, shouldn't we make some decisions about where we're going to invest? Don't you think that in 20 years we might look like a really great niche European institution that will lose its relevancy in our rapidly changing world? Well, nobody thought that was a very obvious argument to start. A few people did, the people from the non-Western. From the rest, the people on the rest got that point, but that was a small minority. Should we be thinking about gender? It was an extremely male institution. Now, of course, as a woman saying that, and of course then the age word, which we're not even allowed to use, made all this more challenging. And as we came to a really good place, now I come to the real challenge, we came to a really good place. It was a good process, people participated, and we were willing to give me in some ways the benefit of the doubt because I was newly arrived. I think that's something about leadership, that as a new arrival you don't have that much time to sort of try to reset the clock or the direction a little bit. And thanks to my really generous colleagues we were able to do it. Then the real challenge came. No sooner had we charted this beautiful plan, gotten the 5 lines of hiring lined up and a few more to come, induced a few retirements, no sooner have we done that, than the other youngest faculty member, a woman and a specialist in a non-Western field, who was tenure track, was offered a position at a very distinguished institution elsewhere in the world. And she was offered immediate tenure. She wasn't anywhere near being up for tenure. And of course, the obvious thing for me with my big agenda to do would have been to go all out and say, we must retain this person. This is, here's a woman, a rare woman, dressed and young. She was on my team. She was home team for this agenda. And yet when we looked really hard, there was also the quality of the institution to maintain. And I realized that the vision had to think about that as well, and about the feelings and thoughts of very distinguished faculty who really feel that you can't squander tenure in any academic institution. It's critical to maintain your primacy, if you will, or your intellectual environment. Now, this was a terrific assistant professor, and I think with a few more years had been tenured with us. But it wasn't right at the time. And so we came to this extremely difficult decision to let her go and yet embark on the agenda and have all the public rhetoric about it that we needed and so forth. And I have to say, to this day, that was, to my mind, the riskiest thing we could have done. And it turned out okay in the end. And I'm not even sure why I tell you this story entirely, except to say that you will come up against these dilemmas, and they can seem like really little things, but all of a sudden, when you've embarked upon this big process, they can really almost make or break what hold you may have on some sort of ability to lead the institution. And as I said, it all turned out well in the end. The last thing I want to say, and then I think I should cede this podium to other thoughts, because there's so many different types of arts leadership among us here today. My move to NYU Abu Dhabi and now the Mellon Foundation, to me, is not a ceding of the field. It is not a leaving of the field of art, particularly the Mellon Foundation, but that was even true trying to build this institution, NYU Abu Dhabi, and giving academic leadership to it. What is really striking that has happened in American institutions of higher education, I think it's true all over the world, I don't think it's just in the United States, but it is especially striking in the United States, is the attrition in the number of people from the arts and humanities who have roles of provosts and vice chancellors and presidents. Those positions, partly because of the huge financial stakes, and one understands this, and partly because of perceptions of social relevance, tend to go to people in law, economics, social sciences, and the hard sciences or engineering. And that's a real shift that the country has seen. And so whenever one of you steps up to these roles for which you really aren't trained, academics aren't trained, especially not humanists or arts people, for anything that smacks of sort of leadership/management, it's actually helpful, because the very fact that you're doing it as someone from the arts causes sometimes some surprise that you would actually have developed somehow some of these abilities. People take notice of, and I think in the end the arts are better off for that kind of trans-sector activity. So thank you for your attention, and go get them.